Without making a sound, Lu Sheng entered Lion Su's room. She extended her hand towards him and tried to ask for help, but he began to stare at her and his eyes filled with revenge. This woman had tried to harm him several times and had even endangered his family, so he had no reason to feel pity. And although this method of assassination was cruel, he had no other option. Lion Su, who was lying on the bed, began to run out of air. Foam started coming out of her mouth and her eyes filled with tears. She put one hand on her neck while extending the other, desperately trying to ask for help. Our boy started watching her, and upon seeing that she was suffering, he began to smile and mentioned that he wasn't any saint, just an ordinary person with some sense of justice and a bit of resentment. At that moment, a demonic energy appeared behind Lu Sheng. Upon feeling this energy, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. He knew better than anyone that this was not good. He lowered his head, and his gaze filled with terror, as only a martial saint could give him this sense of death threat. In a matter of seconds, Lion Su began to faint and slowly started to close her eyes. He began to observe her and remembered that he had the ability of premonition, which warned him of possible crises that could affect him or those around him. A level 9 martial saint should have a similar ability, so it was time to change plans. While his body was emitting a blue energy, he began to extend his hand toward Lion Su. He couldn't continue torturing her as it could attract the attention of the Supreme Martial Saint. If he got trapped here, it would be a big problem. He brought his hand closer to her and clenched his fist tightly, and without an ounce of compassion decided to kill her right then. He began using his power, causing a powerful black energy to appear, which wrapped around Lion Su's neck, slowly suffocating her. Upon feeling this, she regained consciousness and tried to scream but was unable. With a calm look on his face, our boy decided to withdraw since the warning he felt in his brow had diminished considerably. In a matter of seconds, Lion Su lost her life, and at that moment, the maids began to approach the room and one of them asked the other to speak more quietly since she was sleeping. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng began to use his power and disappeared from the room at the speed of light. Slowly, one of the maids who was holding a tray with a glass of water opened the door and their eyes filled with confusion, as they did not know what was happening here. Not long after, they realized what had really happened, and the maid dropped the tray on the floor, causing the glass to break. Panic flooded everything and they started screaming, informing that Lion Su had died. At the same time, in the province of Kyoto was the mansion of the Chen family, where Lingsu's grandfather's birthday was going to be celebrated. The mansion was full of important and powerful people. Among the crowd there were two women talking to each other. The sexy woman with pink hair put her hand near her mouth and with a happy look revealed that even a martial arts master had come to celebrate old Chen's birthday. For her it was a great honor. The woman with gray hair crossed her arms, closed her eyes, and with a smile mentioned that old Chen was a master of martial arts who knew many important people. Some of his friends were even level 8 grandmasters in the army. 3 beautiful women appeared, and they began to show a kind smile. None of them had ever seen an 8th level master, and upon hearing that an 8th level master was going to be present, they decided to make an effort tonight, since if they managed to capture the attention of someone important, they would win a big prize. Among the crowd was also Lingsu. Her expression showed disappointment. She couldn't believe this was high society. The women started enjoying the birthday party, while on the other side, Lingsu crossed her arms and with a calm look thought that this was very boring and remained silently observing. While she was lost in her thoughts, someone extended a hand towards her and noticed that it was Lingsu's first time being part of such an important party, realizing that she wasn't used to it, advising her to enter together. Upon hearing this, she snapped out of her trance and with a surprised look began to wonder what was happening. He was her cousin named Yi, a tall man with long hair. He extended his hand towards her and invited her to enter the party together, but she started shaking her hands, and with a nervous expression refused since she was waiting for a friend, asking him to go in first and that she would enter in a while. He started to observe her and couldn't help but feel somewhat surprised since he didn't expect her to have friends in Kyoto. The man decided to meet her friend later. After saying this, he put his hands behind his back, turned his back on her, and began to walk away. She began to look at the man and sighed, and with a sad look thought that ever since she had arrived home, the attitude of the Chen family had been quite kind. Chen Yi had also been very attentive with her, but she always felt that he was not someone trustworthy. While she was distracted, someone asked if she believed that this guy wasn't a good person and had other intentions. Upon hearing this, she snapped out of her thoughts and with a confused expression began to wonder what was going on. Someone wearing a white shirt started approaching Lingsu. She began to turn around and with an earnest look explained that she had that feeling. This person was none other than Lu Sheng. She turned around, and upon seeing him, became happy and couldn't help but smile when she realized he had really come. Lu Sheng approached her, closed his eyes, and with a smile reminded her that he had promised to be there to support her, and naturally he had to keep his word. He began to observe her with a calm gaze. He was very proud of himself since from Lian Su's mansion to the Chen family mansion there were at least about 1,000 kilometers of distance. He had covered them in less than 5 minutes, being 10 times faster than the speed of sound, realizing that this spiritual power was very good. Ling Su closed her eyes and with a sincere expression she mentioned that she didn't need him to back her up as this wasn't like in novels, revealing that in reality the Chen family had treated her quite well, and although there was still some distance between them, they had already begun trying to accept her. She opened her eyes, and with a sad gaze she began to look to the side. But at that moment, our boy approached and with a serious expression revealed that what they were trying to accept was her fortune. She raised her head, placed her hand near her chest, started observing him and her eyes filled with surprise. She began to gaze at the ground and explained that returning always requires paying a corresponding price. Our boy remained calm. He had thought that Ling Su had a personality that would make her fight until the end. But he hadn't thought that in the end she would choose to give in. Considering the environment in which she had grown up, maybe she really needed a fake family to fill the void in her heart, and although he could understand it, it didn't mean he was going to approve of it. He turned his head back and with a firm look, decided not to think about the matter and make a better decision for her tonight. While he was observing something behind him, Ling Su placed one hand over her chest, extended the other to one side, and with a confused expression asked what did he mean by this and what was he looking for. Lu Sheng found his target and with a smile mentioned that he was looking for an unfortunate person who shone brightly. Upon hearing this, Ling Su's gaze filled with confusion and surprise. She began to sweat as she didn't know what Lu Sheng had in mind. With a calm look, Lu Sheng started to stare at his target and asked her who that guy was. She turned her head to the side, began observing the target, and remained silently thinking. A man who seemed quite wealthy appeared. Beside him were 2 beautiful women. Seeing that young Master Zhuo had arrived, the butlers bowed their heads before him and welcomed him with a smile, indicating for him to enter the party. Zhuo started walking towards the entrance. Lu Sheng and Ling Su began to observe him and she revealed that this guy was Zhuo Yuman, the second son of the Zhuo family. The Zhuo family was one of the most influential families around Kyoto. They even had a bit more power than her Chen family. This guy wasn't a big deal, after all he was just a playboy, but on the other hand his older brother, Zhuo Jilin, was indeed someone important. Upon hearing that she had just said she was part of the family, Lu Sheng started looking at her and it caught his attention. She became nervous and her gaze filled with surprise. She didn't know what was happening. Lu Sheng took her hand and explained that she was being surrounded by useless things, just obstacles that would smooth out her path toward true strength. He closed his eyes, and with a kind smile asked her not to worry since he was going to take care of solving all this perfectly for her. Seeing that Lu Sheng had taken her hand, Ling Su began to blush like a tomato. Lu Sheng let go of her hand, turned his back on her and with a confident smile started walking away. Ling Su was left frozen and her expression filled with confusion. 2 men approached Zhuo, the older man who was from the real estate agency, and the other man tried to talk to him. But Zhuo closed his eyes, started shaking his head and with a tired expression ordered them to leave. But at that moment, someone appeared in front of him. Zhuo extended his hand forward and with an angry look ordered him to step aside. This was none other than Lu Sheng. He didn't even pay attention to him, and with a calm expression remained silent. Upon seeing Lu Sheng, Zhuo's gaze filled with surprise and he couldn't help but be left speechless. Lu Sheng began to stare at Zhuo with a piercing look, making him start to feel fear. It didn't take long for him to realize that his physique, his appearance, his bearing, everything about him exuded an oppressive sensation that left one breathless. The arrogant Zhuo ran out and hid behind some women, leaving them somewhat confused. With a serious look, he asked our boy who he was. Behind them was a luxurious car. Lu Sheng moved to the side, started looking at the car with a curious gaze, and asked if it was his car. Zhuo put his arm around the women's necks and with an angry look replied yes and asked why he was asking that. With a surprised look, Lu Sheng thought the car was very nice and asked how much it had cost him. Zhuo began to observe Lu Sheng and couldn't help but start smiling. He felt relieved knowing that this talkative guy had only approached because his new car had caught his attention. Zhuo crossed his arms, closed his eyes and with a proud smile explained that he had bought this car for more than 80 million. And obviously it was something special since there was only one in all of Longguo. Upon hearing that this car was worth more than 80 million, Lu Sheng's gaze filled with joy and he couldn't help but start smiling. Lu Sheng approached the car and with an incredulous expression began to touch it. Zhuo, who had his arms crossed, approached him and started smiling as his gaze filled with joy upon realizing that he was a true talker. Lu Sheng began to gaze at the ground and with a smile praised the car but apologized. With a serious look, he started to release a powerful blue energy and said that this car made him feel a bit envious. Upon feeling this, Zhuo was somewhat confused and went on alert as he didn't know what was happening. Without thinking for even a second, Lu Sheng jumped on top of the car, crushing it as if it were a can. Seeing this, both Zhuo and the other guests were in shock. While the car was emitting smoke, Lu Sheng got off it, started observing it and couldn't help but smile, mentioning that now he felt a little better. Obviously, Zhuo didn't like this. He got angry, put his hand on Lu Sheng's shoulder and with a look full of rage, gritted his teeth, called Lu Sheng a friend and asked what he meant by this and if he was looking for trouble. Lu Sheng started to look at the ground and remained silent. Lu Sheng began to release energy, turned around and with a piercing gaze asked who Zhuo was calling friend. Upon feeling the energy, Zhuo started to back away and realized that this wasn't good. Lu Sheng's energy began to expand everywhere. Zhuo started looking up at the sky and upon seeing this, he was left speechless as his gaze filled with fear. While Lu Sheng's body was surrounded by suffocating energy, he turned around and with a serene expression introduced himself as Lingsu's friend from the Chen family, adding that if he was upset, then he was welcome to seek him out whenever he wanted to settle things. Zhuo began to retreat. Lu Sheng started pointing backward and with a serious look revealed that Lingsu was behind them. Everyone's eyes filled with fear and curiosity, and they all turned around asking why he had so much audacity. Behind them was Lingsu. She started pointing at herself, and upon seeing that Lu Sheng was blaming her for everything, she got nervous. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe.